Okay, welcome. Today I want to offer some reflections about mirror neurons and their link to trauma and just basically what they are and why we might see someone else being hurt and how that affects us. So really some fascinating research today. Okay. So, mirror neurons. I want to talk a bit about mirror neurons today. And this is partly, obviously my work's a lot with leaders, it's a lot with ex-boarders, and this idea that some people come to me or some people comment on my videos, I loved boarding school. It was great. And then I might ask the question, well, did you see any bad things happen? And they'll say, well, yeah. So today I just want to explore and explain that often when we have been witness to violence, that still affects us emotionally. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the research, Bessel van der Kolk, and also I want to talk a few stories as well, David Cameron, Boris Johnson as well. So what are mirror neurons? So essentially, mirror neurons, he talks about this in this book, page 58, this idea that a mirror neuron is, it came from an experiment. A monkey had his brain wired up to a sensor, and they were analyzing the brain movement and what was brain activity when a monkey was picking up some nuts. And the monkey's brain was still wired up to this sensor, and the researcher was putting nuts into the cage. The monkey wasn't moving, it was just watching, but they noticed the same neurons were being triggered, so they named this mirror neurons. And basically what he says in here, he says mirror neurons explained that previously unexplainable aspects of the mind, such as empathy, imitation, synchrony, and even the development of language. One writer compared mirror neurons to neural Wi-Fi. We pick up not only another person's movement, but her emotional state and intentions as well. And talks a little bit in here, this book by James Barratz called Awakening Joy. And it says basically neuroscience is revealing that we literally feel with others through what are called mirror neurons in our brain. In his book Field Notes on the Compassionate Life, Mark Barash describes this process. Mirror neurons are a kind of brain mechanism dedicated to empathy's motto, I feel you in me. One study showed that the same cells that light up when a person's finger is jabbed with a pin also light up when someone else's finger is pricked. We wince when we see someone stub her toe and hop painfully on one foot. We know how it feels. Just as our brain is said to have a grammar nugget that enables us to acquire complexities of language, perhaps we have a golden rule nugget containing the neurological ground rules for compassion itself. What I find fascinating is that overlap to boarding school. So all childhood trauma, maybe it was your brother or your sister who's being beaten. What this research is showing is that your brain is also being affected. It's also having those signals. And Dr. Paul Miller, who's a psychiatrist, he talks about this, that people who watch terrible things happening to others are impacted even more. Yeah? So I think this is really, really key, is that we watch someone else being hurt. That is actually traumatizing us. And I'll just carry on with Judith Herman in her book Trauma and Recovery. And she doesn't talk about mirror neurons, but she says feelings of guilt are especially severe when the survivor has been a witness to the suffering or death of other people. To be spared oneself in the knowledge that others have met a worse fate creates a severe burden of conscience. So just this idea that if we have seen someone else, and if we were at home, our parents hurting our siblings, or our parents hurting each other, that's going to impact us, traumatize us even more. And in a boarding school setting where you have 10, 20, 30 people in a room, I've heard so many stories, and I have 30, 40 biographies on my shelves up there, and most of them talk about beatings. Most of them talk about sexual abuse. And so if you witness that, that is going to impact your brain. So if I just talk about a few stories, so this is from Sonia Purnell's Just Boris, and he's talking about corporal punishment at Heatherdown Prep School. And I don't think this was Heatherdown. Oh, Ashdown House. Heatherdown is David Cameron. So this concern impressed his future proprietor, Conrad Black, who noted that Boris's school days were one of the few subjects on which he became serious and a believable and passionate opponent of corporal punishment. He told Black how he would hear the younger boys crying in terrible pain and just how distressing it was. So that for me is mirror neurons. So he heard the younger boys being beaten, and how that was impacting him. The other, thing here, David Cameron, for the record, he says a similar thing. Punishments were very old-fashioned. They included frequent beatings with the smooth side of an ebony clothesbrush. If I shut my eyes, I can see myself standing outside the headmaster's study, hearing the ticking of the grandfather clock and the thwack of the clothesbrush on the backside of the boy in front of me, and feeling the dread of what was to follow. So yeah, just some ideas here. It's like, I see a lot of people will say, I went to boarding school, nothing happened to me. Yes, it was going on, but nothing happened to me. What this research is showing is that, you were affected by that. It did affect your brain. You are still carrying that trauma in your brain. What we've learnt to do, and, as Joy Chavrin says, the ABCD, the D is the dissociation. We've learned to dissociate from it. But, as Bessel van der Kolk talks about, this is a quote I know, he says, the big issue for traumatized people is that they don't own themselves anymore. And so what we have learned is that in order to make you resilient to trauma, is that you've got to own yourself fully. So you've got to start feeling these things. What did it feel like? And often, it's group work, or it's, actually talking about these experiences, letting the emotions out of the system. To say it didn't affect me, yes it did. Mirror neurons is now showing that it does. So if you have someone who says, boarding school was great, ask them, well, did you see anything? And then mirror neurons will say that, well, actually your body was impacted. And as Paul Miller says, we are impacted even more. As James Baratz is talking about in Awakening Joy, if we are, see someone hurt, we feel that pain as well. So just some ideas here. There's also another segment there about Dan Siegel's work and Mindsight, but I'll have to do that on another day. I'm getting close to time. So just some ideas. I'm just kind of processing them myself, but I just think this is really key for us to understand that, we are impacted. listening and seeing how other people were impacted in these schools. So just some thoughts. Please do comment below. I've got a podcast going live this week with psychotherapist Graham Music. Fascinating. He's an ex-boarder, talking about emotional neglect that happens in these schools. Just looking at it from he's an author, just looking at it from that perspective of emotional neglect. So yeah, hope you enjoy. Have a good week. And yes, this Friday I'm off to Glastonbury to do the last bit of filming for our documentary, Boarding on Insanity. So exciting to be finishing that. So many blessings. Take care.